Okay, cool. So, after last week talking about Samson, yeah, it was Samson. So I was thinking about just the judges in general and how they're kind of a weird placement in between, what's it called, in between the prophets of Joshua and the prophet of Samuel that we get later on, and how God never really refers to them as prophets, with the exception of that one prophetess that stabbed the guy through the skull with the tent stake. Classic. Anyway, so I know that was pretty cool, but besides that, um, there wasn't any really other ones called prophets. They were either called judges or leaders, depending on the chapters. And pretty much all of them were just mostly they were mostly militaristic style leaders rather than spiritual leaders. Like mostly what they did was they just helped ward off certain enemies and use God's influence to do that. Like, for example, the prophetess, she was stabbing the tent stake through the head of a military leader that was invading their lands. Or Gideon, in the classic, VeggieTales story, that he, scared off the enemy with trumpets and tubas. Well, in the actual story, it was just, like 50 guys doing a berserk style torch run through the camp. But, same diff. And then, another one. The one guy that my sister told me about that I was like, no, that can't be real. But she was right. Some dude was like, hey God, if I come back victorious from this war, the first person that comes out of my house, I'll sacrifice to you. And it's like, why did you make that choice? Like, that's a really bad choice. Like, at least like, you know, choose something that's more in line, like the first animal that comes out, or the first animal you see, or just like anything else, but like the first person that comes out of my house, I'm gonna sacrifice to you, you know. So some weird stuff happened in Judges. I think we could all agree weird stuff happened in Judges. Like, if any book was to receive like the weirdest stories, without a doubt, like the five books most have some weird stuff, but Judges kind of takes the trophy because, like, to be honest, there was some weird stuff in other books, but it was a lot more of just you know what's it called, like visions and stuff like that. Which visions are weird, and like there's like a few weird things in the New Testament, like that one time that Peter or Paul like walked out of jail and walked home and then realized it wasn't actually a vision and it was real and they're like, oh, okay. And it was really awkward for them, which is kind of funny. Just and they walked in right as they're like people were planning on like how to break them out of jail. But yeah, it was kind of a funny story. Anyway, so back to the main point. So I decided to kind of look up and figure out like kind of what happened that caused the judges to really you know come into place. So if we go back a little bit before that, we have Moses being called as a prophet. So we all, well, not all of us, but most people know Moses ran out of Egypt after an interesting childhood and growing up. He ran out after killing a dude who was whipping a slave. And so after he killed him, he ran away. Then he ended up meeting a spiritually inspired dude and marrying one of his daughters, and then he, while tending to his flocks, happened to cross a burning bush. And God, in the burning bush, talked to him and called him to be a prophet. Now, then he goes back and through, oh my gosh, I forgot how many plagues there were. Was it 7? I feel like it was 7 plagues. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, there was a number of plagues that happened that screwed over the Egyptians, and they finally just begged the slaves to leave. The house of Israel at this point. So the house of Israel leaves. There's 12 tribes. that's important. Now, I don't know. If people want, I could try and, go back and explain a little more about the 12 tribes and go more in depth on them, as they also received each their own blessing. But it's kind of cool. Anyway, so if we continue on, so Moses goes out with them. Now they reach the promised land, and they send some scouts in there, including Joshua. Now they come back after scouting out the land, and so almost everyone, except for I believe Joshua and one other dude, everyone else was like, no, we can't go in there. They're monsters. They're just going to slaughter us. There's giants there. We're going to die. And Joshua and some other dude, I forget his name, I'm sure he's a cool dude, was like, with God, we could do it. We could totally do it. God said we could, so we can. And, yeah, so the majority was like, no. So everyone else was like, we don't think so. It's too scary. And so, of course, they didn't go. So, God was like, you doubted me. You got to the promised land and you didn't want to go in. We're going to wait 40 years until everyone who rejected the idea of going into the promised land is dead. And that's basically what happened. So 40 years later, they get to the promised land. But then Moses does a little dum-dum. So God's like, okay, go and point at the rock to make water shoot out of it. So he goes up and then he hits the rock instead and water shoots out. And God's like, didn't do what I said. I try to make yourself look cool. So you're not going into the promised land. But I'm going to take you up because you're kind of cool. And so he gets taken up off the earth after he passes his mantle. And I'm pretty sure his staff, the one he boom, part Red Sea. So he passes that on to Joseph. And God calls Joseph to be the next prophet. Now, of course, Joseph feels really inadequate. And so, also, Moses' father-in-law, who is spiritually inspired, helps him out with a thing regarding all the houses of Israel. Because he was having a lot of problems, because they were all like, we have these issues, and everyone was coming to him. And there was a lot of people. I think we get a rough number whenever they leave Egypt, but it's a lot. It's a lot. So anyway, these lot of people keep coming to him and be like, hey, we have these issues. Some of them are really trivial. He stole my chicken, and he's like, dude, why? And some are a lot more serious, I won't get into serious ones, but some more serious ones. Anyway, so his father-in-law was like, okay, here's this system where you can get these certain elders, and each elder is over a certain group, and you have smaller group leaders and larger group leaders. And so he's like, okay, sweet. And then all the most important questions that they couldn't resolve got to him. So it became a lot more, streamlined. So anyway, Joshua continues on with this. Now he pulls everyone into promised land, and he goes through, and as God commands, he removes everyone else that's in there. Now, God had people removed. Number one, because God promised land to the Israelites. Number two, because everyone there was extremely wicked. They were worshiping false idols, and that was the main thing, just destroying commandment. Number one, I believe, I showed no other gods before thee. And so, yeah. So, they go through and they wipe out basically everyone. But then, they reach a certain point where, Joseph... Now, the timeline gets a little weird, because there's the last chapter of Joshua. And in the last chapter of Joshua dies. But then in the first chapter of Judges, Joshua technically hasn't died. It doesn't say that until, halfway to the latter end of the chapter. So, I don't really know exactly, but they get to a certain point where basically, so the House of Judah, which is the one that was in the latter half of the Bible, and the House of Joseph, kind of was, but not really, but kind of. Anyway, and then Simeon. So those three houses got together and they're like, hey, there's still this northern corner that we need to clear out. Want to come help us? So I'm gonna show them map real quick. Okay, good. So anyway, so basically, we have this is Israel, and so we have the southern part and the northern part. This is the coastline, and right here is like the Mediterranean Sea. I'm pretty sure. So basically, this was the last part they had to conquer. So I'm not sure about this part, but I'm pretty sure it's this part. But anyway, it's somewhere around here on the coast was the last of the Canaanites. So, well, that's not exactly true. So, pretty sure they were going up here. And this is where they were clearing up the last of the Canaanites. But then there's the other last of the Canaanites that the rest of the tribes were just like, actually, wait. I'm not 100% sure. The maps are very confusing looking to me. Everything considered. Also, they don't have like half the cities. But then again, they change a lot during the Bible. There's a lot of stuff that happens. It's kind of a decently long period of time. So anyway, the main point is they were fighting on a certain part of the coast to get the rest of the land. But then the rest of the tribes just decided to not fight anymore. Like, first of all, fighting kind of sucks, you know. And mass slaughtering towns is kind of, not a great thing to do, you know. Not really enjoyable, hopefully. So, you know, they were just like, well, let's just, live and let live. So they started living together, and then, of course, they started marrying, and, big surprise, they started having relations. And it says, let me just pull scripture. So in Judges chapter 1, verse 28, it's talking about the house of Manasseh. And it says, and it came to pass that Israel was strong, and they did put the Canaanites to tribute, and did not utterly drive them out. So basically just had them start paying taxes. And neither did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites that dwell in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwelt in Gezer among them. Neither did Zebulun drive out the inhabitants of Kidron, nor the inhabitants of Nahalo, but the Canaanites dwelt among them, and became tributaries. And so basically just goes on a list of each of the houses and explains that they're, not being kicked out. So, as each of them started getting into this, they obviously, as I said, they run into the problems. So then, in chapter 2, in the beginning, God sends an angel, and the angel starts basically, telling people, God said to do this, and you guys aren't doing it. And he's like, and you shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. You shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? And so, basically just like you're not doing what I told you, And if you don't do what I tell you, then you don't get all the blessings. And so then afterwards, actually it's in the beginning of chapter 2, that it says that Joshua died, and then all the elders also died, and then after that, in that second generation, people started being more wicked. And so then in verse 16 of chapter 2 of Judges, it says, nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges, which delivered them out of the hands of those that spoiled them. And yet they would not hearken unto their judges, but they went a whoring after other gods, and bowed themselves unto them. They turned quickly out of the way which their fathers walked in, obeying the commandments of the Lord. But they did not so. Now, to be fair, I read that second verse like 3 times, because I'm like, why is it written like this? I love King James Version, but sometimes they just write verses really badly in the translation. I'm like, you could have written that so much better. So, effectively, God would raise up a judge. The judge would help liberate Israel. Somewhat, but liberate them nonetheless. But then they would just return back to serving these idols, and they wouldn't follow the commandments as their fathers had done. And so, it goes on to just keep talking about that. And basically, because then, like, verse 19 tells it perfectly. It says, "And it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers in following other gods to serve them, and to bow down unto them. They ceased not from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way." So we see how, they just keep going back and doing the same stupid things. And so, then finally, at the end, it says, "Therefore the Lord left those nations, without driving them out hastily, neither delivering them into the hand of Joshua." And in the previous verse, he says, well, 2 verses, says, "I will not henceforth drive out any from before them of the nations which Joshua left when he died, that through them I may prove Israel, whether they will keep the way of the Lord, to walk therein, as their fathers did keep it, or not." So basically now he's just using the Canaanites as a kind of foil to the Israelites in being able to punish them and kind of drive them into a corner whenever they get too wicked and they need to remember of Christ. And also that he can, empower the Israelites to liberate them whenever they do turn to him. And so, of course, we see this numerous times throughout Judges of them, being more wicked and then having a judge show up and helping out the people to liberate themselves. And of course, we see this continue it more and more and more and more throughout the scriptures. And it's kind of a weird combination, but for some reason I felt like I should kind of combine these two. Yeah, let's just do it. It's weird. Really weird actually, but let's just do it. So, we see that this is the beginning of their life in Israel. Now, from this, after the book of Judges comes Ruth, which is kind of a weird story in between. But after Ruth comes the book of Samuel. Right? Let me double check that real quick. Yeah, I was right. First and second Samuel. So, in Samuel, we both see the boy prophet getting called while he was, in the temple, or in a tent behind the temple, or near the temple. Anyway, he worked in the temple. And so, we see him get called, and he's the new prophet. And we see him as he goes through calling Saul, and then all screwing up, and then eventually getting killed in the battlefield. And we see David being called, and, killing a Philistine, and then killing lots of Philistines, and then joining the Philistines, and then, coming back and becoming king. And so, then after that, we see Daniel make a series of really bad mistakes, like a big series of whoopsies. Whoopsie, your husband died. Anyway, so then he has Solomon. So Solomon comes in. He's not, dirtied from murdering and killing lots of people. And so he gets to build the temple. And then he screws up really bad with getting 700 wives and 300 concubines. Whoops. Which, like, That's just too many. Like, that's a whole village. Like, out in the country, that's a whole city. You know, like, how many alliances do you need? Like, legitimately, because all 700 were princesses. How are there that many princesses? Let alone like Disney has like 10, maybe 15, but still, you know, Solomon is like Disney. That's chump change. I got 700. You know. Anyway, I doubt I could use magic. That's a different story. Main point is just like, dang dude, that's wild. So anyway, and the interesting thing is that it's more so God was upset with Solomon because he got married to the 700 women, not because of the polygamous side, which of course he was like, bam, I didn't authorize that. But it was more so because each one of those political marriages was to stabilize them in their power and also to stabilize their financial situation. And that's why they were the richest. And basically, he was putting his trust into other countries to help him out rather than putting his trust into God to help him out. So that's the main reason that God was upset with him. At least from what I could tell from my readings. So yeah, the main point is that he also goofed up. So then he met a guy who was. Let me check my notes real quick because his name is a little bit weird. Um, Jeroboam. So he meets a guy named Jeroboam, and he's like, "You're really cool. I like you." So we get a little bit of a Daniel situation where a king is falling out of power. He finds a really cool dude. He's like, "I like you," you know. And so he puts him into a place of power. So he puts him over the tribe of Judah. Judah, tribe of Joseph. So he's over the tribe of Joseph. And then this prophet comes up to him. Now, it specifically states. Here, let me just read this for you guys. Okay, so I found the verse. So it's First Kings chapter 11, verse 29. We're gonna start at 28 because it gives a little more backstory on Jeroboam. So it says, and that Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. And it came to pass at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way, and he had clad himself in a new garment, and they two were alone in the field. Okay, so he has he's got, his new drip on. He's got his new outfit, really nice looking, and what does this guy do? And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it in 12 pieces. Like, when can, you gotta love prophets in there, physical lessons, but like, can you not just like try or like do something else, like, a classic, plant analogy. We just pick up a leaf and tear it into 12 pieces, you know, or just people in their 12 tribes. Like, my goodness, like the woman that was cut into 12 pieces. Or just, she's like, wow, wow, thanks. You could have just told me. You just had to tear up my new garment in 12 pieces. Now, to be fair, this is kind of interesting that it is a new garment that he tears up instead of an old one. What that means, I have no idea. Anyway, so, and he said unto Jeroboam, take these 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord out of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have one tribe of my servant, for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. And then he goes on to explain kind of why he's doing it, how they've kind of, forgotten God and gone off and done their own little, idolatry. And it's kind of funny, actually. I was talking to my sister today on the way to church. She was like, why do, like, modern day idols of, like, money or, just objects and things like that, she's like, I can understand, people who don't have religion just going after those things and having those, idols, you know. But like, for example, you have like the all-star example, the speed run by the Israelites of like Moses has been gone for like 20 something days. What about, hear me out, we build a golden calf? I mean, like, hey, excuse me, you know, I want something to worship, and since, God hasn't been around here because the prophet's gone, you know, what better? We just, build ourselves a calf because, that's a good thing to pray to. Which, like, hear me out. Out of all the things you could worship, why would you choose, like, animals? Like, it's just like a weird thing out of everything to choose to worship an animal. Like, I don't know. It just seems kind of weird. The different idols people choose to make throughout all history. You know, like for example, well, just like a lot of like these gods just have like it's just weird. It's just weird. Like, what do people choose to worship and how they choose to visualize the things that they worship? It's interesting to say the least. But I actually want to make it. I'm gonna make a video about that. That's a cool idea. I like it. Okay, now back on topic. So now Jeroboam gets this. So he does the smart thing and runs to Egypt. Yeah, he does like like Joseph and Jesus. Go to Egypt. It's a great place to take a vacation. And so, well, Joseph wasn't really a vacation. Slavery, the best vacation. I mean, like, you're not being paid, but you're still working. So, well, jail. Anyway, off topic. So, Solomon did have a kid. His name was Rehoboam? Rehoboam. So, Rehoboam was a kind of messed up dude. So, as soon as he comes into power, he's like, okay, our taxes are gonna go crazy. He's like, you guys, you're arm and a leg, quite literally. He's like, my pinky will be like my father's thigh, which is basically just like, yeah, it's gonna be a lot worse. I'm gonna weigh on you. Yeah, it's gonna be really, anyway. So it's gonna be really bad. So he so he starts like doing that, and everyone's like, no, I'm not into this. I'm gonna leave. And he's like, hey, I don't like that. And then Jeroboam is like, I'm back now, and everyone's like, ooh, you can be king. And he's like, okay, cool, that sounds chill. And then Rehoboam's like, no, I don't like that. So then he runs back to Jerusalem with the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, and debatably some Manasseh, but that's a different story. So while he's there, he's like, okay, guys, we're gonna go and attack them because they wanna leave. And so then God sends someone to stop this because He wants it to happen. And by not want to happen, I mean like He doesn't want them to go to war against each other because He want them to split. So it says in verse 22 of chapter 12 of First Kings, but the word of the Lord came unto Shemaiah, the man of God, saying, speak unto Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and unto all the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the remnant of the people, saying, thus saith the Lord, you shall not go up nor fight against your brethren, the children of Israel. Return every man to his house, for this thing is of me. They hearkened therefore to the word of the Lord, and returned to depart according to the word of the Lord. So it goes pretty good. And then like instantly, well not instantly, but in the same chapter, it's like and then Jeroboam just turned to idolatry. It's just like what the heck, you know? Like we all have our issues, but like when God's like, hey, you're gonna become king, he's like, okay, becomes king. Let's worship this other guy. Anyway, I don't know. It's just like obviously it's very much of a time period thing. Like, actually, funny side note. So the other day I was scrolling on YouTube, and I don't know if any of you guys, I was like, I hit this ad, and it was like this guy and this older one was like, magic is real. The government is trying to keep us from knowing magic is real. You can learn magic. Just, click the link below, and we can show you how magic can transform your life. It's like, yeah, magic has been used throughout all of time and history, so it's real. And now you can learn it for yourself. And it's just like, you know, regardless of everything, I never expected to see a magic ad. It's just one of those surprising things. So anyway, so that's how the tribes get split into the northern 10 and the southern 2. The northern 10, of course, become the lost tribes, as those get taken away by the Assyrians, yeah. Which I talked about that in the Jonah video. So I just kind of want to talk about, those two things. I didn't know why those didn't really feel like they went together at all, but I just kind of like want to talk about both of those, which probably should have been two videos, but I don't know. It just felt like really cool. So basically, that was how why the judges were used, and how the judges came about, and then also how the kings came about, and in the end tore apart the house of Israel. Now, one of the really interesting things, going back to Judges, is that whenever they first settled, the tribes like kind of stopped interacting with each other for a while. It wasn't really until the tribe of Benjamin did a big no-no to somebody's female slave. Yeah. And then all the tribes got together and just collectively just destroy the tribe Benjamin, and they're like, okay, we're not gonna kill all of you. And then they just like went and kind of helped them recuperate in not good ways. Anyway, the main point is that for the majority of judges, they're pretty much all spread out, and don't really interact with each other. And it wasn't until a couple things in Judges happened in the later half that caused them to come back together enough that whenever, in Samuel, Book of Samuel, that I believe they get into a conflict and they come together again, and then Saul does some cool stuff and he becomes king as per the people. So basically, Judges is what leads into the people getting a king, and then their kings are what kind of end up dividing the kingdom again. Anyway, it's just really interesting. Also, I kind of want to do a more in-depth history video, because growing up, in one of the Bibles I had, in the back, it had a kind of a important events list with different chapters or different books. So like, around the time of, so and so, this civilization was starting to come up. And whenever this happened, this is when Rome fell. Yeah, which, okay, that didn't happen until way later, but this is when Assyria fell. So it kind of clues you in on major world events that were happening around the Bible that both help it feel like more like the world, and also help you kind of get a better understanding of like when things were taking place. as I don't know about you, but like I was homeschooled, but in history, I was never really. It's always like Rome, Mesopotamia area. It was kind of like all the world was just like sectioned off in history. So you weren't like, oh, this happened when this happened. You were just like, well, I know this place's history, and I kind of know this place's history. So I guess these two would interact. You're like, whoa, that's crazy. But yeah, so I kind of want to do something like that where I kind of like go through the Bible, starting in Abraham, and either ending right before when Christ was born or at the end of the New Testament, one of those two, and kind of just go through a lot of major world events that were happening around the Bible. I think really cool. But yeah, so that's just something I'm planning on starting working on. But yeah, anyway, so if you guys have any more video ideas or anything like that, comment below. Please like and subscribe. Have a great Sunday. Bye.